thank you very much. Ed was a great advocate and supporter of this new approach I wanted to take to the book, and I wanted to tell stories. I wanted people to, I wanted to make the institution of the courts come alive, so that these were not just old portraits on the wall of the Supreme Court building, but they were people we all knew. People, this book covers 1972 to 1987. They were people you'd see on the street. I would pass them on the street. I would see them at the court, and that was what I wanted to reflect. I do want to remind the justices who are here today. I told Justice Kennedy this before dinner, of the words of Samuel Johnson, who said, "The chief glory of every people arises from its authors." So I want you to know your future is in my hands. The subtitle of this book, and I think this is the first volume with a subtitle, but it's A Journey Toward Justice, 1972 to 1987. And this was a journey out of scandal, first of all, and many of us remember that. It was also a journey out of an industrial age ruled by white males to a time of consumerism, to a time of open access to the courts, and greater justice for more people. And that's the story I wanted to tell, and how the court made this migration to that era. There were those on the court who wanted to hold to traditions and let others, like legislators, be the leaders of those changes. And there were others who felt the court needed to move when the legislative branch did not. The personal stories to me start with Parker Lee McDonnell, and Ed and Kelly mentioned him. The interesting personal story about that is that Justice McDonnell performed my wedding ceremony in 1984. So I should mention that my wife Madeline is also here tonight. I think that the court also threatened to drive us apart as I kept working on this book, and she kept wanting me to finish. But I was a reporter covering the court for the St. Petersburg Times, and she covered the court for the Associated Press. So we were competitors. I think this was a conspiracy and restraint of trade for us to get married. Justice McDonnell replaced Justice Hatchett, who I saw earlier. I think he's back this way. And one of the interesting things, we were talking about the court files and the court papers. One of my great moments early in the research of this book was the court was generous in letting me look into the confidential files. And Eric Robinson, who's here, the archivist of the court, was very helpful in all of that. But Justice McDonnell's arrival in place of Justice Hatchett, changed the outcome of a case that some of you may know called Raisin versus Raisin. And Justice Hatchett was writing the majority opinion to overturn spousal immunity in Florida, but he left for the Federal Court of Appeals. Justice McDonnell came, sided with the dissenter, Justice Alderman, and spousal immunity lasted for another 12 years until Alderman was replaced by Rosemary Barquette, and that reversed again. But the early vote sheet, when I ran across it in the files, and the draft of the Hatchett opinion was really a great moment in showing the significance of individuals in the outcome of cases at the court. I will also say those confidential files, for a historian, showed the richness of the internal debates, and for me, actually elevated the court and its work because it was a greater understanding of the seriousness with which they all took those issues. Justice McDonnell is also an example of the danger of pigeonholing people. While that was a particularly conservative opinion, a few years later he was the dissenter in a case where the style of the case actually included the words AKA Crazy Joe Spaziano. It was a death case, and Justice McDonnell, noting the significance of mental illness to support the jury's recommendation of life, wrote a dissent and added, "After all, they call him Crazy Joe." That was in 1983, and the death sentence was upheld by the court. 33 years later, Justice Sonia Sotomayor for the U.S. Supreme Court receded from that court's affirmance of the Spaziano death sentence in Hearst versus Florida, which is now very much in the news. Spaziano is now serving the life sentence that the jury recommended and that McDonnell wanted to impose. When Governor Graham chose Leander Shaw to succeed Alan Sundberg, there had been 2 black applicants and 4 female applicants. The story written for AP by my wife noted that Graham was asked, perhaps by her, if he planned to name a woman to the court. Graham said he did not see that on the horizon, probably because he didn't really expect to make another appointment then. But then Jim Alderman resigned and Barquette was selected. And 2 things were significant about the announcement of her selection. One was it was the first time that we know of that there was actually a press conference attended by the justice being appointed. The other thing is it was the first recorded instance of a Supreme Court nominee kissing the governor on the cheek. The other thing in this book is that I wanted to focus some on the lawyers. This is not just the justices operating in a vacuum. And the lawyers who brought the cases, who moved these cases forward, were very important, and a lot of them are in the book. I don't know if Sammy Cacciatore is here. I think he might have been on the list. If you're a journalist, you get hold of the list of who's going to be there. But he was 3 years out of law school and brand new in Booty Nance's law firm when he took on Hoffman versus Jones, or what was originally Jones versus Hoffman, which revolutionized tort law with the comparative negligence rule. Philip Frieden was a young lawyer who took on the case of a 19-year-old black woman named Gwendolyn West, who walked into the path of a Caterpillar grader that was backing up and was crushed by its huge rear tire. Frieden raised the concept of strict liability in West versus Caterpillar Tractor. He told me that he offered to settle that case with Caterpillar for $10,000 and would have settled for $5,000. Caterpillar said no, and it became the leading case on strict liability in Florida. Justice Adkins compared his opinion in West to the labor of Hercules in cleaning the manure out of the stables of King Augeas. But the reason we have all of those annoying backup beeping on tractors and dump trucks is Philip Frieden and West versus Caterpillar Tractor. So that story's in the book, and in the opinion, there's almost nothing about Gwendolyn West and anybody else. I look around the room. Steve Grimes is here, Harry Anstead's here, Peggy Quince is here, Barbara Pariente, and so many others who came onto the court after this period, but are in this book in other roles. Jack Harkness is here, the second state court administrator after that was set up in 1972. And in fact, Hank Cox, I think we should just name the book after Jack Harkness. So in just a few moments, Chief Justice Labarge is going to speak. He's the first justice to serve consecutive terms as chief since 1925. I want to note that was a time when the chief was chosen by lot. Which was actually the provision in the Constitution then, that it was chosen by lot. And the justices would take a new law book and would pick the winning factor, like the last digit on the right-hand page was the highest number, or the first letter on the left-hand page was closest to Z. That was how they picked the Chief Justice before 1925. When Jimmy Adkins was the court's only law clerk, Justice Ellis told him that as a new justice, he had done that, and they opened the book, and he had a 7. And he thought that was very promising, that he had a real chance to be the chief. And then Justice Taylor, who happened to also be Justice Ellis's father-in-law, opened up the book and said, "I have a 9, and then closed the book. So I just, the third term is still possible if you play your cards right. The first time I interviewed Sandy Dallenberg for this book, he told me that I should hurry up with the book because some of us are starting to forget the stories we've been making up about ourselves. There were a couple of stories that I really could not entirely confirm, but I decided they were so good and that there was nobody to contradict them, so I would just include them in the book. But it is a book about all of us. It's about the work that we do as lawyers, about the work we do in representing clients in a way that is both honorable and zealous. and changing the law in the process. So as Ed said, I wrote this book to be enjoyed, to take readers inside the minds and sometimes even the hearts of the justices, and to let you all share their journey toward justice. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks very much.